Hey everyone, this is Dr. Eric Fields, the weight loss psychologist. A lot of times we don't get serious about our weight loss plan because we rationalize our weight gain, our excessive weight, as resulting from something that is not that big of a deal. And I know that sounds kind of absurd because how often do we feel so badly about us being overweight? How often do we feel defeated, get even depressed about it? So, how then do we flip back and forth from feeling so badly about our weight to then being like, well, my overeating is not that big of a deal. I mean, after all, what am I really doing? I'm eating some extra calories. I like cupcakes at night. I like to indulge with, a big quart of ice cream from time to time. So I eat more than I should. What's the big deal? We go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And so sometimes it's hard to figure out, like, who is the real voice inside of our head? And to understand if we're satisfied generally, overall, with the way that we're living our life, in order to determine that, we have to really take a look at how we are feeling. We have to use our emotions as a guide to what we truly want and what we're truly dissatisfied with in terms of how we're living. The way I explain emotions to my clients is that it's basically like an alarm clock. Now, the alarm clock, a lot of times, works well. It goes off when it should. But there are times when it doesn't work well, where like it's going off when it shouldn't go off. Picture setting your alarm clock for 6 o'clock in the morning to wake up for work and it not going off till 10 o'clock. And then maybe the next day it goes off in the middle of the night and wakes you up at 2 o'clock. It's a faulty alarm clock. Anxiety conditions, anxiety disorders, right? Depressive disorders. That's when the alarm clock often is malfunctioning. Not always. Sometimes we go through a healthy depression or a healthy level of ongoing anxiety. And I know, like, if you think about that, you might conclude, but that doesn't sound healthy at all if it's ongoing. If it's really trying to tell you something and you're not paying attention to it, then it's healthy. It's doing what it should. It's saying, hey, I'm still here. We're still really upset with the way you're living your life. Then it's doing what it should. So in psychology, we often try to differentiate between unhealthy depressive conditions and more healthy depressive conditions that may still constitute a disorder and require treatment, but the treatment really is to try to get you to listen to this alarm and do what you have to do. Okay. Barring any psychological or emotional disorders, when we experience some euphoria, sadness, anxiety, excitement, um, feelings of love, it tells us about what's going on with us. And it's really important. Now, there's an emotion that we try really hard not to pay attention to, but it's not such a horrible emotion. It's actually really good in a lot of instances, and it should be listened to as well. The problem is, as human beings, this one emotion has us running for the hills. We hate experiencing this. We hate it even more than depression, even more than anxiety. We hate this emotion more than any other emotion. And what am I talking about? Guilt. Guilt is that feeling like, oh, I don't feel good at all, and it's because of me. I caused my misery. That's one of the worst emotions we can experience. But really, if you look at it like any other emotion, that's basically giving us a signal that something's not right, any other negative emotion, right? It shouldn't be so feared. It should be respected. So if you're constantly going back and forth with, oh, I hate the way I look, I'm so depressed, I don't like being overweight, why can't I control my eating? And then flipping over to, it's no big deal, whatever, this is how I enjoy life, YOLO. What I want you to do is pay attention to if that emotion of guilt surfaces. Because here's the thing, emotions tend to be more steady states than our thinking a lot of times when we're talking about um, giving us a signal. In other words, it doesn't go away until you address it. It stays there. So when we are going back and forth, flip-flopping like this, right? This emotion of guilt is still with us. So we know it's with us when we're saying, I feel defeated. I don't like the way I look. Why can't I lose the weight? Why can't I have some kind of willpower? Really beating ourselves up, right? We know it's there at those times, but it's also there if you really pay attention when we are trying to rationalize our behavior and say things like, what's the big deal? It's just food. It's not that serious of an issue. People have far worse issues than this. And if you really start to pay attention, you'll notice it's still there. It might not be yelling as loud as it does when you're in this pattern or in this mindset of really beating yourself up, but it's still there. And a lot of times, it's banging on the door as you're engaging in the behavior. So as you're eating that big quart of ice cream at 12 o'clock at night, or going back for a third helping of a big dinner you've already had, or you're picking while you're cooking and you just know you've consumed a ton of calories, or you're having your seventh small meal during the day, right? It's there. Listen to it. It's saying things like, what are you doing? This is not right. You don't want this. This is not living according to your values. You want something different for yourself. You want something better for yourself. This isn't even that enjoyable. As you're sitting here wolfing down the food, you know you don't feel good about this. But in those times, what do we try to do? Well, in psychology, we call it repression, which has to do more with, you know, unconscious thoughts that we're completely oblivious to. But when I talk about repressing this emotion in those periods of time, I'm not talking about in the traditional sense of repression. I'm talking about you hear it, but you're just trying not to pay attention to it. You know, like when our kids aggravate the hell out of us and we're trying really hard to ignore them, it's kind of like that. It's not unconscious if you just listen and you take a couple seconds to really try to hone in on how you're feeling. So don't run from guilt, embrace it. It tells us if we're living according to our values or not. It tells us if we're doing what we should or not. Listen, if you really are totally fine with overeating, and I'm not saying this sarcastically, I never judge, but if you are really like that, if that's the real you, if that voice is the real one that says, YOLO, I like to enjoy food, I don't care, whatever, so when I'm overweight, and you don't experience this emotion, then do you. But most of the people, if not almost all of the people that follow me and or are in my group experience this emotion constantly. And the only difference is that there are times where it's screaming at us and times when we kind of put like a glass house over it to not hear it, but yet we can still hear it through those glass walls. The only difference is how much we are paying attention to it. So just understand that when you look at this, at these reactions going from one extreme to the other, understand that there are the real reactions and the not real reactions. And the not real reactions are, or the artificial or fake or pseudo reactions are the ones where you're rationalizing. To tell the difference between the two, use guilt as a barometer. This is Dr. Eric Fields. I'll have more to say about this at another time, and I wish all of you the best success on your weight loss journey.